Hi there! Welcome to Jam at Home. In this video, I'll be sharing how I plan our meals for the week and how I meal prep. This is to make your life easier in the kitchen, especially during busy work days. I'll also be sharing some tips on how I care and store my ingredients to keep them fresh for a longer time. Meal planning ends and starts on a Saturday. Every end of the week, I check leftovers and cook or preserve ingredients that are about to go bad. This is also the time when I do my meal planning for the coming week para iwas yung mga tanong na ano na naman lulutuin ko, because it takes time to think what to cook, right? And during my meal planning, I make sure that I prioritize cooking older ingredients first. The problem with storing veggies though, especially leafy greens, is that they go bad pretty quickly. I tried a lot of containers, pero ang ending lantang gulay pa din sila until I learned these hacks that I'm about to share. So make sure to stay with me throughout this video for these tips on what I do to prolong the shelf life of my ingredients. So these are older ingredients that I just took out of the fridge. This is a week-old cabbage, but notice it's still looking fresh. And my mushrooms that have been stored in the fridge for about 2 weeks still has no molds. So just tune in and I'm gonna share some hacks later on in this video. So today is a Saturday, so I'm just using up all these ingredients and I'm gonna stir fry this for lunch. Then I also check my remaining meat so I know which are the older ones, yung mga matagal nang tambay sa ref, and I make sure to cook that earlier in the week. Let's talk about leafy greens first. I always store lettuce or kale or any leafy greens because these are versatile ingredients. They can be used to make a side salad, you can put them in sandwiches, you can even make a juice out of them. What I do is I wash, chop, trim, and dry a good batch of leafy greens all at the same time when I'm meal prepping, and just store them in the fridge. This way, anytime I need some, I can just easily grab a handful and dump them into a bowl. The problem with trimming veggies like this though is that they will go bad pretty quickly. Usually 2 days, may mga nalalanta na. So here goes my first hack. I sprinkle some baking soda at the bottom of the container. And then I just line some paper towel or some tissue over it. In here, I'm using the tissue that we got from yesterday's takeout food. So yeah, if you have tissue from your takeaways, don't throw them away because you can use those for something else. And then I'm sprinkling some toothpick all over. I'm basically adding things that are good at absorbing moisture. And baking soda and wooden things like toothpick or a popsicle stick are good at this. You can also use salt or sugar. These are also good at absorbing moisture. I just prefer baking soda because they remain dry even after using them to store your food like this. It can still be reused for something else. You can mix it with vinegar and it'll be a good cleaning solution. Anyhow, after putting all my veggies in my container, I'm just covering them up with a tissue or a paper towel, and I'm just gonna cover that and pop this into my fridge. I'm also doing the same for the rest of my veggies, like my romaine lettuce here and my kale. Another advantage of doing this all at once is I get to clean and wash my salad spinner just once as well. Or if you don't have time to do all this, meron namang nabibili sa grocery store na trimmed and washed na, but it's still the same. It's gonna go bad after 2 days, so you'll also want to store them this way. And just a disclaimer, it doesn't mean that all of the leaves will not wilt. Some of them will, but most of them will be preserved at least for a longer time. So you'll want to prepare a batch that you're likely to consume in the next 4 days. Keeping leafy greens like this are the quickest way to sneak in some veggies into your meals. Usually, mga pagkaing Pinoy kasi medyo makarne. And having greens like this readily available in your fridge is the most convenient way to add vegetables and make your meal balanced. And you might say I'm using a lot of tissue or paper towel. Don't worry, because you can reuse this to wipe your counter or you can use this to clean any surfaces. I left some untrimmed greens kasi baka hindi namin ito maubos. So for the untrimmed greens like this, I usually wrap them in a paper towel that's sprinkled with a little bit of water. And then I'm also storing that in a Ziploc bag. This will keep them fresh, or at least keep them for a longer time, for about a week in your fridge if you store them like this. Now, I don't want anything to go to waste, so the baking soda remains dry even after using it. So it's still powdery. You can mix it with vinegar and use it as a good cleaning solution for your Ziploc bags like this. Moving on to the other veggies, I also wash, trim, chop whatever I could in advance, just like what I'm doing now. Minsan kasi, isa pa to sa mga nagpapatagal sa pagluluto. Minsan kukunin mo pa, i-chop mo pa, lilinisin, nakakatamad. So, mas magandang nakahanda na sila para pag nagluto ka, shoot ka na lang or halo-halo ka na lang. Mas madali. In here, I'm just basically washing everything and I'm patting them dry with a kitchen towel. Again, water causes moisture. Moisture is one of the reasons why veggies like this go bad quickly. These are the ingredients that I'm likely to cook earlier in the week, so I'm storing them in this type of container. But as usual, I'm gonna line it with a paper towel. I have some asparagus here and I don't like the hard part or yung matitigas na balat, so I'm already removing that using a vegetable peeler. I'm just lining them up and rolling them like this para mas madaling tanggalin. Then once I chop everything, I'm gonna store these in a silicone bag. And as usual, I'm gonna add some popsicle stick to help absorb the moisture, and this should remain good for 2 days until the time that I'm ready to cook them on Tuesday. Now for the okra, it's just plain and simple, just putting them in a storage container kasi hindi naman yan mabilis masira. For veggies with stems like peppers, tomatoes, I'd recommend removing the stem because these are the first ones to rot. For the other ingredients like squash, cabbage, lemon, lime, I usually wrap them in a cling wrap. This will prevent those vegetables from drying in your fridge. Kagaya ng ginagawa nila sa mga grocery. So, if sa grocery galing yung gulay mo, then don't remove the cling wrap anymore just to prevent those vegetables from drying. Pero pag sa kagaya ko na sa palengke bumibili kasi mas mura, then you'll want to wrap that with a cling wrap. For the bean sprouts, I'll recommend soaking them in water with a little bit of salt. This will help prolong the shelf life. Otherwise, they're just gonna last for 1 day if you keep them inside the plastic. We drink apple celery juice every morning, so we juice these stalks. So para mas lumambot sila, I just soak them in water and keep them in the fridge as well. For the leaves, ginujuice ko na siya agad kasi madaling masira. And for the rest of the veggies or beans that I'm not able to cook earlier in the week, I'm gonna blanch them so that I can store them in the freezer. So I just quickly blanch these beans and asparagus for 30 minutes. 30 seconds. Not 30 minutes. Overcook na yun. But just 30 seconds, not to overcook and destroy the nutrients. And I'm gonna line them in a tray like this, freeze them for a bit before I put them in a container para hindi sila magdikit-dikit at mas madali silang lutuin for next time. For the other veggies na tumutubo sa lupa, like the carrots, onions, mushrooms, I wrap them in a newspaper or a paper bag first, and then I'm store them in a Ziploc bag and vacuum seal it. This will prevent the carrots from drying, and this will prevent the onions from sprouting. And yes, don't forget to label them just so you don't forget what that is. So next time, don't throw your paper bags from grocery or your newspaper because you can use them to wrap your veggies like this. I left some unwrapped because these are the ones that I'm going to use for the week. For the other root crops like potato or sweet potatoes, I also wrap them in a newspaper and store them somewhere in a cool, dry place. They're okay to store at room temp, so I don't put them inside the fridge. You might be wondering why there's an apple there. Put one apple in your basket just to prevent them from sprouting. Now let's move on to the meat section. So I like to use these containers because OC lang. Gusto ko pantay-pantay sila, and I like these containers because you can see what you have at a glance. My husband is also in the food business, so we order meat from their supplier. So usually we get a quantity that's good for 2 or 3 weeks even. Then I just divide or chop them into portions para pag magluluto, isang labas na lang ng container, defrost, and iluto mo na yung nilabas mo. Before kasi, as is ko na siyang sinasalpak sa ref, or if you buy meat from the grocery na naka-tray, iniwan ko lang siya sa tray, tapos ipapasok ko na lang sa freezer. So pag magluluto na ako, ilalabas ko yung buo, tapos yung hindi ko nagamit, ililipit ko, ipapasok ko na naman. Which is not a good practice when it comes to food handling. These are the perfect freezer containers for me because there's 2 types, the deep ones which I use for the meat and the shallow ones which I use for my frozen vegetables and other frozen goods. Like this french fries right here. My daughter loves french fries, so we usually buy the big bag and I just divide them into single serving portions like this. I also do the same for butter. I usually buy a big portion or a bigger size of butter because it's cheaper, and then I just divide them into single serving portions like this, and I store them in the freezer so that every time you need some, I'm just gonna take the container out, pull out one piece, and then put it back in the freezer. Kesa naman kukunin mo yung buong butter, isa-slice mo pa, tapos yung hindi mo magamit, ibalik mo pa. So simple things like this will make your life easier in the kitchen. Another thing that I love about these containers is that you can store them upright. Yun nga lang, medyo nagli-leak siya ng konti. So you'll want to pat dry your meat before storing them in these containers. I believe they're airtight though because hindi pa naman na freezer burn yung mga meat ko so far. And that's why for my marinated meat, I usually store them in a silicone bag like this. And same goes for chicken because these are bulky. So mas na ma-maximize yung space sa mga silicone bags na ganito. Now for fruits, I use this type of silicone bags. I like it because the size is just right for portioning fruits or a mix of fruit that I can use to make smoothies, smoothie bowls. Para pag may leftover fruits ako, nilalagay ko na siya sa mga ganong bags and I store them in the freezer so I can easily take them out whenever I need to make smoothie bowls for breakfast or for snack. Speaking of snacks, I make it a point to make our own snack for the week. Why? Because when you make your own snacks, you know exactly what ingredient you put in there. So, naiiwasan yung pagkain ng mga processed food. Now, I'm really trying to be intentional about this because it's not always that I have the time to make, but in a week I try to make one, and I usually follow super easy recipes or yung mga ingredients na konti lang para madaling gawin because again, I'm not a baker. Storing my ingredients like this has worked for me, has made my life easier in the kitchen kasi hindi na ako maghihimay-himay palagi ng vegetables, and whenever I have to cook, kukunin ko na lang sila sa ref, and it cuts my prep time from 45 minutes. I can usually cook a dish for about 30 minutes because I have my ingredients readily available and na-trim na. Ang hirap lang kasi talaga lumabas ngayon. So we buy all the ingredients that we'll be needing for the week and store them this way to help prolong their shelf life. Before, my approach to meal prep is lulutuin ko silang minsanan every weekend tapos nakaportion na into containers. Kaya lang nakakasawa. Parang hindi ko na tuloy na-enjoy yung food ko, especially towards the end of the week. So, maigi pa ding bagong luto. So, para mapadaling magluto, nagpa-prepare na lang ako ng mga ingredients na ganito. So this is how my beans look after 2 days of being prepped in the fridge. And look at my carrots, they still look fresh. These has been stored in my fridge for about 2 weeks now. And itong mga to, I prepped on Sunday and I'm cooking them on a Monday. Here's how my bean sprouts look after 4 days. As you can see, they still look very fresh. Ginawa ko silang lumpiang gulay. I made a good batch. And yung iba na hindi ko naluto on that day, I can store it in the freezer so I can have some that's readily available whenever I need a side dish for my meat. Para lagi kaming may gulay. Now, again, it's a Saturday. It's the end of the week. We're doing our usual cleanup. Again, I'm checking all my leftovers, making sure I consume them first. So I have some leftover lettuce. As you can see, this has been stored for a week now. Napaka-fresh pa niya. And my tomatoes that I've marinated in olive oil balsamic along with red onions. Ang ganda pa ng itsura niya. And these are leftover vegetables that has been stored for a week now. And maganda pa ang itsura niya. Sila is still looking very green. You see, these are little things that you can do in the kitchen to make your life easier para mas madaling magluto and you can enjoy fresh and good meals every day of the week. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you give it a like, if you share, or if you subscribe to my channel, and if you have some suggestions on content that you want to see, please feel free to add a comment in the comment box. Thank you for watching.